Oh, kia ora everyone, ko hana toku ingoa. My name is Hannah and I'm so stoked to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me, Sarah, and it's so wonderful to see so many people here who I've met across Aotearoa, and I love you all dearly, and I'm sorry if I haven't had as much time to connect with you. I've also met a lot of people I've not met before here, and many of you I now love dearly as well because you helped in the kitchen. So I just want to say just how grateful I am to be here. So I'm going to talk about zero waste today, specifically drawing some connections between zero waste principles and degrowth principles, and I really want to leave you with this idea that zero waste is a practical movement that is part of the roadmap, toolkit, and destination for getting to degrowth, and we can do this through communities, and it's already happening. So I got into the world of waste because Liam and I started living without a rubbish bin in the beginning of 2015. And that led us to really radically reduce our waste. So we produce, between the two of us, roughly 1.4 kg of curbside household waste to landfill, which is roughly 0.2% of the average New Zealander. So people often wonder how we got into this, and it's quite sort of random, really. We didn't study or know anything much about environmentalism. I have a background in law and policy, and so I was doing work, a lot of computer-based work, as you can see on the right there. That's pre-zero waste days, which you can probably also see, and mostly in social justice space, and Liam is a professional jazz drummer. But we did always have this kind of desire to leave less of an environmental footprint on the world, and we would do little things. But to be honest with you, we were starting to notice all of this waste we were throwing out and all of this plastic pollution or plastic stuff that we had, and we just started to realize that this it just didn't really align with our values. And so we thought, well, why don't we just try living without a rubbish bin? And so we did. And after a year of doing that, our life had changed quite a bit. We were shopping in completely different places to get our essentials. We were making a lot of stuff that we needed from scratch instead of buying it. And we were just resisting this urge to buy things, whether it's new things, secondhand things, whatever. And what we found was actually this wasn't as hard as we expected it was going to be, and we were also saving heaps of money. And we were also having all of these other sort of life-changing realizations, so we began to become quite obnoxious and evangelical, and we did ruin some dinner parties with friends and family. And so we thought, okay, clearly we've got something in our system that we need to get out, but this is not the audience. So why don't we do a public talk where people can come consensually because they want to hear us talk about rubbish? So we did that, 2016, Central Wellington, and more than 200 people came. None of our friends and family, they stayed well away. And we were just like, whoa, this is the level of interest in Wellington. Perhaps this will be what it's like everywhere. And so we did what anyone would do. We quit our jobs and we started the rubbish trip, where we were going to travel the whole of New Zealand, giving this crusade-like talk. We were going to do 6 months North Island, 6 months South Island, but we had no exit plan. So 3 years later, we were still going. We did more than 400 talks, every region, every city, almost every district of New Zealand, to more than 20,000 people, and then COVID hit. And because we were couch surfing, hitchhiking full-time, and hosting events not very pandemic friendly, so we stopped that. We had a little bit of a regroup and a rebrand, and we now still do loads of presentations, but we're also doing much more. We're not on the road anymore, doing much more stuff in the local community, and much more research and advocacy, so branching out a bit. So Liam is now compost manager at KaiCycle. He's the chair of the Aotearoa Plastic Pollution Alliance. And I'm doing lots of work in reusable packaging systems and regulating businesses. We're both part of the research team at Zero Waste Network as well. So we're trying to do advocacy at local and central government level. We submit on so many government consultations, and we try to create resources to help others as well. We also do contract research, consultancy, media commentary, but we also try really hard to stay grounded in the real world as well, because that's where all of this started with. So we do things like worked with this university to go single-use cup-free. We've done heaps of stuff with Simon, who you'll recognize from catering, because he's just trying so hard to just reduce waste across Wellington. So we're always sort of doing initiatives like that. So what is zero waste? The first thing I really want to start with is saying that this is a homegrown movement, started by this man here, Warren Snow from Kaitaia. Who knows Warren Snow? Yeah, so sadly Warren passed away last year, but he is really a mentor for us. He is recognized internationally as the grandfather of the zero waste movement. He started talking about zero waste in the early 2000s. So, contrary to popular opinion, zero waste is not just about landfills and recycling. It's actually, both zero waste and the circular economy are strategies for reducing humanity's demand on the planet's raw materials in order to stop greenhouse gas emissions, resource depletion, biodiversity loss and pollution, all of which come from extracting resources. Zero waste also recognizes that it's not waste that's the problem. Waste is a symptom of the bigger problem, which is an economy based on overconsumption. The circular economy is also a good framework in the sense that it's not just about not doing bad things, it's also about actively regenerating and restoring as well. So how do we do all this? Both zero waste and the circular economy have this fundamental formula that sits at the core of the idea of the concepts. So zero waste follows the waste hierarchy, which basically says, you want to reduce waste? Great. So the place to start is by preventing waste in the first place, by rethinking and redesigning products and business models, reducing consumption and establishing reuse systems. And if we stuff that up, then we start to think about recycling. And why? Because with each layer of the waste hierarchy you go up, you reduce more waste, but you also reduce the extraction of raw materials, and so you're reducing more greenhouse gas emissions and more pollution. Circular economy has the exact same concept embedded into it. So yes, with the circular economy, we want materials and products to flow in loops, but not any old loops. We want them to be small, closed loops. So things like sharing, reuse, repair are better than big open loops like recycling. And again, that's because the circular economy talks about embedding the value, maintaining the value of the product. That value is embodied materials and embodied emissions. So when we're talking about reducing waste, it's not just that little lump of stuff we reduce at the end, it's what the whole life cycle of the product that became that waste represents. When we reduce that waste, we reduce all of that life cycle impact. However, when we reduce waste, we also reduce the waste and the plastic pollution. When we're talking about things like landfills, exporting of our waste, and also plastic pollution. And the public really cares about these issues. And sometimes we notice that there's sort of like a little bit of like, well, snobbery is not quite the right word, but within environmental movements, sometimes people are suspicious of things that the public really care about, like, well, it's not the real problem. But actually, plastic pollution and waste are affecting the planet on a planetary scale, just like climate change. And we know this from planetary boundaries theory. For example, one of the planetary boundaries is novel entities, which are materials, synthetic things that are geologically new to the planet. This novel entities boundary was calculated last year, and humanity is in massive overshoot. And this is predominantly from plastic pollution, but also chemical pollution, but most of those chemicals are chemicals that are added to plastic. So this is really validating of people who say, yeah, actually, we do also need to be thinking about reducing waste and plastic pollution. So when we go and listen or advocate to government, we often hear government use terms like zero waste, circular economy, resource efficiency. And to be honest, a lot of these terms don't really resonate a lot with the people on the ground who are actually already doing all of this work. And to be honest, when we hear government say things like circular economy, it's like, do you really think that that means what we think it means? Not quite sure. And what we found is that often government struggles to articulate what it exactly is that they think the circular economy is. And this comes back to zero waste. Zero waste is a practical movement, and for zero wasters, and I think this is possibly also really useful for the degrowth movement as well, it's not enough just to say we want a zero waste world. We actually have to articulate what that looks like so that people can understand what we're talking about. And so because Liam and I have been living without a rubbish bin for 8+ years now, we have a really clear sense of what this world would look like if everyone was on this waka with us. Firstly, we'd all have the essentials we need, but they'd all be gotten to us without packaging or reusable packaging systems. We'd have far shorter supply chains, because the shorter the supply chain, the less the waste, but also more local jobs and local resilience. We'd be harnessing organic materials. None of them would be going to landfill. We wouldn't be sending it to anaerobic digestion either. We would be using it to build up local soils for local growing. Yep, we'd still have products, but once they came into the economy, they would circulate for much longer because they're built to last and to be repaired. But there would be far fewer things in the economy anyway, because we would be normalizing sharing and service-based business models. And last but not least, all the materials that we use to make stuff would be redesigned so that they are not toxic. So this is a little bit of our vision, and it's not just us talking about these things. This is Zero Waste Europe, who've created a picture of what a world without single-use plastic looks like. And we think it's really important to tell these stories because it makes it real for people. It makes you really concentrate on what the world is going to look like, but also you start to spell it out and you're like, well, actually, none of this is that new. And not only is it that new, but I know Bob down the road is doing half of this stuff already. And so you start to realize that this is possible. And one thing Liam and I have learned from the rubbish trip, being on the road for 3 years, is this stuff is already happening all over the country. In fact, the fact that Liam and I live zero waste is interesting to a point, but we reckon the real story is in all of the individuals and organizations out there who make it possible. We wouldn't be able to live without a rubbish bin if it weren't for all of the people and organizations who are selling food unpackaged, developing reuse systems, composting, growing local food, doing resource recovery, reuse, and repair. And these businesses and organizations, lots of them are not-for-profit, but many are for-profit as well. But the thing is that they are purpose-driven. So through the rubbish trip, it's always been really important to us to amplify these stories and get them out there. Because the thing is that it's because they sort of paint a picture of what the circular economy looks like, and they make us realize it's not something that we need to invent. It's something that we need to rediscover, reconnect with, and then also encourage government to see it too so that they can do some supporting to help these things to flourish. So for the rubbish trip, this kind of connects to a point I really wanted to make, that we're trying to take abstract concepts and bring them down to a human level that actually makes sense to people. And so this empowers us to be able to say, hey, that thing you're doing, that's the circular economy. That's it right there. This is degrowth. This is what we're talking about. So for Liam and I, with the rubbish trip, it's all about living without a rubbish bin. It's about bringing human scale action in order to bring about system-wide transitions to zero waste, circular economy, degrowth. It's not about some neoliberal individualization of responsibility. It's more about the fact that this is something people can do. And taking action on a community level is not individualizing responsibility. It's grounding for people. It gives people strength to carry on. And we need strong communities to weather the shocks that are coming. So I encourage all of you to go out there and keep walking the talk, keep doing what it is that you're doing, and just remember that supporting those local organizations who are already doing things, and that's really what I tried to manifest at this conference with the catering. Bring these people to the fore and start to talk with local and central government as well. This is where we need to be funneling resources for the future. It's not some great big infrastructure thing that goes bing. It's people doing stuff already. So thank you so much for listening to me, and I appreciate it.